Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King. And the goal of this podcast is to help you create an ecosystem and an environment where employees thrive. Look, Dan and I are back, and we have another topic that we believe is super critical in building nonprofit success, and not just nonprofit success, business success. But before we get into the topics, before we get into all of the meat of the conversation today, have you subscribed yet? Have you liked the episode? Have you reviewed the episode? Because we want to be able to expand. We want to be able to scale our efforts and be able to create a production and an episode and a podcast and a show that gets as many ears and eyes as possible. But we can only spread the message further if you help us. So we're just asking for you to take 1 second, and just hit that subscribe button, hit that review button, or find someone in your network to share the episode with. Dan, how you feeling today?
I'm good. The sun is shining. The snow is melting. It's Monday, right? This is where it starts. Your Monday sets the tone for the rest of the week. Let's go.
You know, we're 5 weeks in, roughly, to the new year. And in December, we have all of these goals, all of these realizations, all of these this auditing that takes place. People are deleting numbers out their phone. They are looking at their weight goals. They're looking at all of their goals, and they get into January fired up. They're excited. They're in the gym. They're eating better. They're drinking their smoothies. They're doing all of these different things. They're having these conversations with their spouse. Even organizational leaders, they're focusing, they're launching, they're all of these different things. And then we get into February, and then things start to die down. Why do you think that is? And what are some things that organizational leaders and just people can do to keep that fire burning?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of like they say a little bit. A lot of people right now are into intermittent fasting, right? and they say kind of the main focus with intermittent fasting is when you wake up and you start moving, it kind of gets the engine burning.
Yeah.
Right. And it burns. But after a while, you kind of hit this point like you're talking about right now, where it's like, okay, how's this going? Do I really like this? Do I enjoy not eating in the morning? Do I enjoy not eating for this period of time? And you kind of lose that commitment, right? You have that, you veer on those two parts of the road, right? You can either stay with it or you can move off of it.
Yeah.
And I think January is just like that, right? Where you're going to it, you're like, okay, I'm gung ho, I'm ready to go. And then you get to February and you're like, man, I worked really hard in January. I'm tired. Maybe you didn't have a strategy in January. Maybe you didn't break it down, but I always think of sustainability, right? Whether it's in leadership, fundraising, operations, etc. You got to take the small wins, right? When you get in January, you're refreshed from potentially having a little break. You get into February and you're like, okay, I just did a lot of work. Yeah. How do I keep up on this? I'm kind of tired. And people need to take a step back and say, okay, incremental change creates sustainable change. Doesn't have to be big movements, doesn't have to be big successes, but you got to look at each week, each day in February and beyond and say, what can I do today? Even if it's talking on the phone with one person, right? Which we know is tough for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Can that impact my month of February? If I can talk to this one person, does that lead to talking to another person the next day, right? Incremental change. If you talk to one person on the phone a day, that's 30 phone calls in a month.
No, literally.
That's way more than people normally have.
You know, when you think about it like that, that is 30 phone calls a month. And why do you think it's so challenging for people to do the one thing? And I think it's so powerful what you said, because even me, you challenged me in that moment just then. It's like, I don't have to make 50 connections today and 50 this and 50 that and do all of these different things if I can't build the muscle memory of just doing the one rep.
Yeah, I think that where people struggle is they think, well, it's not going to make a difference if I only do one small thing a day. I got to make a big change, right? Because psychologically, big changes get you excited and small changes are boring, right? People, it's like those quotes people have about, from professional athletes, right? We got Allen Iverson years ago talking about practice.
We're not
right?
talking
No one's thinking about practice. Like, I'm telling you, when I started trying to get back to basketball this past year, I'm just trying to do 30 minutes a day. And I
Yeah.
was just trying to shoot and get in 30 shots, right?
Mm,
And I'm trying to start off that practice by doing 15 shots right in front of the hoop, trying to
yeah.
calibrate my shooting form, right? That
Yeah.
I'm working on, squaring up my shoulders. Like you can do that in anything. And I think that's boring to people. And they're like, well, I want to do something, but I don't want it to be boring. That boring stuff is how you
Mm.
get to the next level. You have to be boring to get to exciting.
You know, it's interesting that you say that because I think about this idea of boring, and it's some of those boring businesses that are making some of the most money. When you look
Yes.
at the laundry, laundromat,
Plumbing.
when you look at plumbing, when you look at
Mhm.
electricians, and all of these different things are making significant revenue, but we're looking at all of the shiny objects. And as I think about the conversation that we're going to get in today, there's 4 stages we believe here at the Culture Lab and the Growth Alliance program that we lead that transform organizations, that move you from mission to money. And those 4 stages are prepare,
Mhm.
prove, partner, and propel. And they go literally in that order because a lot of times we're looking for that shiny donor, we're looking for that major gift, but our systems aren't optimized. We don't know our story, we don't know our strategy, and we don't have systems in place.
Mhm.
Then, once we have those systems, once we have that clarity in the story, and once we have a strategy, then the second step is we don't know how to prove or market or tell our story effectively. And then number 3 is that, all right, we're telling our story a little bit better. We're getting out there. We're proving that we're the best.
Mhm.
And then we don't understand how to create authentically driven, mission driven partnerships
Mhm.
that can actually drive our mission forward. And then let's say we're doing it. We're doing it well. We have a bit of partners and volunteers and various people, but then we get stuck and we don't know how to propel forward.
Mhm.
It's February. It's the beginning of February when this episode is being recorded. And we recognize that you're 4 weeks in or 5 weeks into the year.
Mhm.
We also recognize when you listen to this episode that there's probably still something that there's a gap in your organization. So, what we want to do over the next 10 to 15 minutes
Mhm.
is we want to help you get prepared. We want to help you understand what are the key characteristics that we see in organizations and what they deal with. That if you don't do these critical areas, the foundation work, just like Dan said earlier, if you don't focus on the 15 shots in front of the rim, then it's
Mhm.
going to be hard for you to make those half court shots like Stephen Curry. It's
Mhm.
going to be hard for you to be able to go out there and have that endurance if we're not focusing on that one step at a time. So
Mhm.
when we look at prepare, there's 3 key areas. Now, there's a lot of areas. There's board work, there's strategy, there's all of these different things. But oftentimes, there's 3 key areas that you need to clean up and audit before you're able to move forward. And those
Mhm.
3 areas are your story and how you tell it, your
Mhm.
strategy and what is it, and then your systems and what are they. And when you think about the story, the strategy, and the systems in
Mhm.
your work in nonprofits and in schools
Mhm.
over so long of a time, what do you think is the most important piece there?
I was just listening to you right now, and that goes to one of my big things we've talked about, which is you should be listening for the next answer, not thinking about what the next question is. You said you got to figure out your story, right? And I started to think about a conversation I had with one of my clients, with the executive thought partner. And the conversation I had with him is we were talking about door opening. And he's like, oh, I don't feel like I fit there. Like, how do I get the door open? Who opens the door for me? And that was when it clicked for me. And I was thinking to myself, listening for that answer from you is, yeah, you have to learn how to tell your story, but you got to learn how to tell yourself, right?
Mm,
You have to believe the story,
yeah.
right? When you're formulating that story and you're building it out from the framework that we provide in the Growth Alliance and that we've started a little bit in that Growth Lab as well, you have to buy it yourself.
That's good.
You have to buy into it. It's not just you telling the story. You have to believe in that story, and it comes across. If you do not believe in that, people feel it and they
Yeah.
see it,
Yeah.
right? And I'm gonna get a little vulnerable here with us, right? Like we've been talking about our big conference coming on, right?
Mhm.
And I'm trying to get back to my creative ways. And you already got it, right? And I'm trying to get myself to buy back into how I used to think in that creativity, right? Because we need people to understand that we are bought in,
Yeah.
right? We get this. We know the impact we're going to make. And that's on a larger scale, but on a smaller scale, the story that you're sharing with others, you have to buy into that first. And I think that's the most important thing, because if you're not in it, how are they supposed to be in it?
It's that's that's powerful. I think that and I know that confidence is contagious.
Mhm.
And I believe that there are some leaders out there and some speakers out there that believe so much in what they're saying that it makes you really look at what you think about what they're saying like,
Yeah.
wow, I
Yeah.
believe it too. And if
Mhm.
you're someone listening in, do you have enough passion when you're talking about whatever it is that you're doing? Do
Mhm.
you believe in what you're doing to the point where it's forcing me to really look inside like, wow, I want to join that cause. I want to volunteer with that organization. I want to learn more. And a lot of leaders and nonprofit execs that we talk to or engage with or we have as a part of our programming, there's a desire to want to grow this organization, but there's so many times where they've lost that belief. They
Mhm.
don't show up with that passion. They don't have that energy or that electricity when they're sharing what they're doing. So there's a few things that we want to give you, and then we'll continue to guide you through this whole process. When you're thinking about your story, we want you to peel back before you're able to propel forward.
Mhm.
And what that looks like is we want you to clarify your problem. Like, what is the actual problem that your organization is solving? What is the why behind why this was started? Now, if you're not the founder, if you're not the executive director, then why did you work for this organization though? What attracted you to this work? What's the personal story behind the actual work that you're doing? And then once you understand that problem, then who is the specific person that your organization serves? Like, who is most negatively impacted by that problem's existence? And we want you to think about that person. We were on a Growth Alliance call last week, and they happen every week, and then you get an opportunity to work with us directly on a biweekly basis. It's a phenomenal community, phenomenal just energy and culture within the organization or within the community. And one thing that we realize is that I think when we start focusing on a board and money and grants and all these different things, we stop thinking about the people that if we don't show up today, who are not served. We want you to think about those people that if your program or your business doesn't exist, they're going to be homeless. We want you to think about those mothers that are running from challenging domestic violence situations. We want you to focus on those students that are dealing with substance abuse. We want you to focus on like who is most negatively impacted by what it is that you're doing. And then number 3, when you think about that, how can you articulate the connection with your story like Dan was saying earlier with how you're bought in to what the focus or the framework is that you're doing as well.
Mhm.
And then how can we build those connection points? How can we build those connection points with your ideal donor, with your person, and then build a platform so that we can get in front of these people? Now, that was a mouthful, Dan. And it's all about stories. It's all about how do we communicate these stories. You were somebody that had to communicate stories to people, to major donors, to be able to get them to buy in.
Mhm.
But what are some of the systems and the strategies that you used on the foundational level that really helped you do it better?
Mm. I did a podcast with a college friend, Safania, and in that it was focused on curiosity content. And that was how she framed it. And I really like that. And the foundation for me is on curiosity content, right? You may have a story, and there may be different ways that you can phrase your story, right, to fit the fulfillment areas and the interests of people, right? Because just like we as people are multifaceted, so is the work that we're doing, right? It's not just a linear straight line, right? There's so many different ways to support missions and different organizations. So the foundation for me is curiosity, right? Because I'm going into these meetings, whether it's someone I've met a bunch of times or it's someone I'm meeting for the first time that I've just spoken to on the phone, or someone connected us over text and we scheduled something, whatever that may be. What I'm looking for is I'm looking to ask questions to them to figure out who they are, what makes them tick, and what kind of association they may or may not have with similar nonprofits or other local nonprofits. Because what that does is when you're learning about an individual, right? That first one, them as an individual, you're learning about what fulfills them, right? What makes them tick. When you learn about their story, you can learn about connections and alignment that may align with the work that you're doing that you wouldn't know otherwise. And then when you're looking to learn about where are they currently involved? What are they doing? Are there other similar organizations? Is there an organization that they're working with where part of it is similar to what you're doing? And that's the part they love, but the other part of it is just something that comes along with it. They're like, great, I can make a difference and an impact. So it's really taking those three focuses, three, I put three up here, I had it down in the corner, those three focuses, and saying, how am I collecting this information and being curious to then figure out how do I align with them, right? I always look at that foundational meeting is it is about them. I am not trying to share anything with them unless they ask. I am not trying to push a narrative unless they ask me what is the narrative of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm looking to put it on them, right? I want to give them the power. And then I want to see other ways that I can add value through my organization and the work that we do.
Let me ask you this, Dan, and for our listeners listening, what are some of the specific questions, though? You know,
Mm.
it's when I think about, the who are you, when I think about what makes them tick, like when I think about these pillars that you've given, what are some of the quick questions that someone could jot down right now that kind of are your go-tos, or the areas in which, like, one of my questions that I always ask, especially here on the podcast, is like, what was your slingshot moment? Like,
Mm.
what was the thing that in your life pulled you back and propelled you to becoming the person that you are today? And I asked that question specifically because it allows someone that I'm talking to literally walk back and then talk about the story that got them exactly where they are. And I find that it's a very similar response every single time emotionally, because they're like, wow, like, thank you for asking me that, because it forces them to go backwards and then walk forward. And in them communicating their story, I learned so much more about them. So what are some of the questions that you recognize or recommend that have worked for you?
Mine are boring, Kyle. we talked about boring, right? Mine are boring. Usually when I meet with someone, the first thing I do before any questions is I thank them for meeting with me. And I tell them, this is why I'd like to meet with you today. This is what I'm doing. But it's not about me. I want to learn about you. And depending, like, let's say it's higher ed, right? Because that's where I've spent my time, even though I've done some work outside of it. The first thing I'm always going to do is I'm going to tell them, okay, I'm going to ask them, how did we get here? Right? Have you always lived in this state? How, like, where did you go to school here? What did you study? Like, boring questions. But my goal is always, I want to keep things as broad as possible, because in those conversations, I'm going to be trying to listen for connections. I'm going to be trying to listen. Okay, did you go to school in the same area that I went to school in? Right? Do you know of or do you follow this sports team? Right? Are you going to tell me about your career? Did you live here, here, and here because you worked for Lockheed Martin or you worked for XYZ? Oh, well, that's really cool. Okay. Well, what did you do for Lockheed Martin? Oh, we have a program just like that over here. Or, oh, you know what? You talked about I went to 3 different colleges because I went to a community college, and then I went to a 4-year, and then I realized it wasn't the right place for me, or they didn't have the major I really wanted, so I shifted here. Well, great. Let's talk about the workforce development program that we're working on that's creating opportunity right here. Oh, do you love to go to lunch at this place in this area? Oh, yeah. I lived there for 10 years. Like, I'm looking for the boring questions.
That's
I'm trying
good.
to keep it broad, and then I'm trying to dive in, right? Because again, that goes back to my theme of I'm listening for their next answer. I'm not trying to go in there. I have like questions that are just kind of floating around in my head, but I'm going in there trying to listen for that next thing they tell me, and then take a second to say, okay, they might connect to this. Let me ask this question. Let
That's
me go,
good.
because then it's really free flowing. We're moving through. And then, I have towards the end, like, if you want to know the actual questions I ask, like if I'm working in higher ed, I tell them, okay, how did you find X institution? How'd you get here? Right. And then they talk about it. And I'm like, okay, what was your experience? Did you have any professors you loved working with? Did you have any classmates? Were you part of any groups? What was that like? Okay, take me through your career. Like, where did you start? Oh, wow. Like, I can see the translatable and transferable skills, but I didn't expect you to say you had, you went in this degree for this reason, and then you went all the way over here to this totally other sector. And then I'll go to and be like, okay, what makes you tick? What do you love to do? Do you like to travel? You like to fish? Do you like to watch sports? Do you play like adult rec leagues? And then, I'll go into a little bit from that, just kind of like wanting to learn what gets them going, right? And then the last thing I usually ask them is like, what can I do for you? Can I connect you somewhere? Can I gather information for you? Can we meet again so I can learn a little bit more? I'm really curious about the fact that you spoke about XYZ. I would love to revisit that again
That's
and
good.
have a conversation with you. But again, man, they're boring, right? But for what it's worth, they've worked for over a decade really well for me. Like,
That's
and
good.
you're always just trying to find connection with people, right? Because people give to people they like, people trust people they like. And all I'm trying to do is, in a really organic way, just build that trust.
Mm. Build that trust. If there's not anything that you all have heard from today, what questions, what boring questions, what simple questions can you ask to build that trust? And I know one of the things that you're asking as a listener is, well, Dan, once you have built that trust, once you've asked these questions, once the end of that first meeting happens,
Mhm.
when do I start asking for money?
Mhm.
When do I start doing
Mhm.
those different things? And you're going to get that question next episode. We're here again for another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. Dan and Kyle are back. And the one question that we always ask you is, what culture are you spreading? The energy you bring is the culture you create. Make yours worth catching. We'll see you all next episode.